Welcome to the MontCAS Test Security and Data Integrity video series. The purpose of this video is to provide the viewer with potential consequences of testing irregularities or test fraud. This video will explore these objectives so the viewer can complete this training with the following understandings. Let's begin this video with which state rules that govern the expectations for test security. ARM Chapter 56, Subchapter 3 is specific to test security, and in a future video of this series, we will spend a little bit more time discussing the test administration observation responsibilities of the OPI and local school districts, and the training expectations for school district staff. However, for this video, we will emphasize the OPI's actions that can be taken for incidents of testing irregularities and test fraud. These rules are 10, 56, 103, 3, and 4. 3 is suspected violation of test security reported immediately to the OPI. For ARM 1056-103-4, the consequences of test security violations include the failure to comply with the administration and security requirements may result in one or more of the following penalties: invalidating test scores for an individual student or for groups of students, placing a school on a monitoring list for future test administrations, prohibiting specific personnel from administering a test in the future, requiring retraining plan for a school or district. Failure to comply with the test administration and security requirements may result in the Office of Public Instruction making a recommendation for consequences to the Board of Public Education for further action within the limits of its authority. What are the potential consequences of testing irregularities or test fraud? First, let's revisit the PDIR concept a little more with West Virginia's test security guidance as an example. The biggest way to combat issues with test security is prevention. Some ways SCAs and LEAs can do this is by establish a healthy testing culture, develop a definition of cheating, focus on high-risk threats first. Since LEAs and SCAs have limited resources and time, focusing on high-risk, high-probability threats is the most cost-effective approach to averting the most damaging threats to test integrity. Develop standard policies and procedures for test administration. Keep testing windows short. Administer tests in controlled environments, establish and monitor the chain of custody, remove testing materials from testing location immediately and score them off-site. SCAs should monitor test administration. In addition to prevention, SCAs and LEAs should have some processes in place for detection of test security. Build irregularity detection into the testing process. Begin monitoring for irregularities prior to test administration. Proctors should monitor for irregularities during the test administration. Use comprehensive integrity analysis to identify irregularities post-administration. With robust prevention and detection processes in place, SCAs should also have response and investigation plans for the alleged and/or actual testing irregularities, focus resources on prevention rather than remediation, establish processes that are conducive to conducting an investigation if one is required, establish a standard or trigger for an investigation. If necessary, train personnel ought to conduct an investigation. SCAs and LEAs should work together during investigations. Transparency can help restore credibility in the wake of an investigation. Use appropriate sanctions. These are some ideas from the nation's experts and states on best practices for upholding the integrity of our assessment systems and keeping assessments secure. Another advent since the time of these new guidelines has been the transition from paper to online assessments and how this can add an extra layer to SEA's and LEA's processes for test security. What are some of the perceived or real impacts from cases of test fraud? As you may already know or be familiar with, by late 2011, test security was one of the hottest topics and most critical of issues in many states and districts. The twin threats of cheating and test piracy to the credibility of testing programs and the soundness of test results require systematic efforts in the design, development, and maintenance of state assessment programs. The Atlanta cheating scandal captured national attention for the breadth and pervasiveness of the corruption, and for the aggressive criminal prosecution of educators that followed. This specific 10-month investigation example involved the investigative team, over 60 state agents, attorneys, and paralegals, 2,200 interviews, and 56 schools investigated. This was a big deal for these schools, teachers, and students. There was fiscal implications as well as the entire integrity of the accountability system. Since this example has had so much press, we won't go into further information about it, but you can watch the summary of this on EdWeek. This PBS video is over 9 minutes long, but we encourage you to view it as a standalone. The judge on this case, Judge Baxter, several years after the verdict, is still comfortable with the decisions, as in his opinion, this was not a victimless crime. Many kids were pushed on. Many of them couldn't read. They should have been held back or been given special resources. Ultimately, it was difficult to gauge what the ultimate impact to students from this adult scandal was. Thus, this story is one to put things into perspective, as this is about the kids and for the kids. We continue to lose sight of this with the recent criminal charges, with nearly 50 people charged in the college admissions schemes, including Lori Loughlin and Felicity Hoffman. These assessments are just one tool in the toolbox to make sure all children have a right to fair, equal, and opportunities to obtain a high-quality education and receive services in relation to changing state academic standards. Now please take a moment to complete these HP5 questions before we move on to the next concept.